Life is sweet. Let it sweep you off your feet.
Hi, this is Allie and Find Your Joy. And oh my gosh, what a treat. Today I have a friend of mine on, Rick Homer from Homer Woodcrafts. Rick is a wood turner, and we're going to find out a little bit about what the heck does that even mean. And if for those of you who are fortunate enough to be watching this seeing it in the video form, you're going to see all kinds of interesting tools and whatever the heck all that stuff is called in the background. Rick, hi.
Hi, Ellie. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I was thinking about, well, first of all, I just found out I've been calling you many things for many years, but I found out I can also call you a wood turner now. So I think it's maybe self-explanatory, maybe not. What exactly is a wood turner?
Well, a lot of people are really familiar what pottery is and what a potter does.
Ah,
I
yeah.
basically I do the same thing with wood. It's all free turning, it's all free hand. It's not like a metal lathe where it's very controlled. With a wood lathe, it's much more freehand, just as very similar as what a potter would throw a lump of clay on a wheel. I
Right.
throw a hunk of wood on my lathe and I just carve it down to what I want.
Holy smoke. So it's actually like it's spinning while you're doing this?
Yeah, the lathe is turning, and I have you can see in the background picture there behind that's my wood lathe in the background.
Yeah.
And behind there's a whole rack of different chisels and gouges, tools that I use to cut away on the wood.
So, wow, this is amazing. So it's a wood sculpture,
Pretty
sort of?
much, yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It really is. It's a very creative process. It's not, I don't really go into it planning on what I'm going to make. I put a piece of wood on there and I kind of let the wood speak to me. It's a very
Wow.
creative process, and I think that potters do the same thing. Like you can have potters who do production work, just as you have wood turners who do production work, like the spindles that you'd see in staircases and things like
Oh,
that.
yeah, okay.
But then you
Okay.
also get the potters that are doing like decorative mugs and vases and stuff like that, and that's sort of and bowls, and that's where I come in. I do sort of very similar work.
Wow. So that's really, you know what? I did not know that. I don't know what I thought exactly. I didn't know what I thought you were doing, but I could see the product was gorgeous, but I hadn't really thought about that it was a spinning, sculpting process because, and so when you say a piece, like I get that because first of all, we all know I'm a bit out there, but when you're talking about it sort of speaks to you, so you start to feel tell me how that works. So you start to feel how it's going to go, or you see a pattern emerge, or
Yeah,
how does it work exactly?
well, it's kind of hard to describe because it is
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a very creative process for me. So I'll put a piece of wood on there and I'll just start peeling away layers of the wood until I find a shape that's kind of appealing that fits with the wood. Because the wood is, people think trees are round, but they're not perfectly round. They've got indentations in them and inclusions and bark and everything else that happens in there. And when you start peeling those layers away, and all of a sudden you start seeing some of the beauty that appears that's inside of that tree that's been captured by everything that's growing around it. And basically what I'm doing is I'm really revealing the beauty that I see in my eyes anyway, and
Yes.
I let that come through in my finished product.
Wow, I love that. So I'm now here's a guess, and you can tell me if I'm close. So when we first start doing anything, any of our art, any of our craft, we're very concentrating on the rules, whether it's music or painting or sculpting with wood turning.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess I'm wondering or imagining that when you were first started this, you're concentrating on the rules of it all, right? And
Well,
then
you're
it's
concentrating on, it really is the technique, first of all, because everything
right.
has technique. Like when you're learning to play a musical instrument, you got to learn the chords and you learn the proper way of holding it and the proper way of strumming it and playing it and your finger positions and everything else. So with wood turning, you have to learn the proper use of the tools and the proper control and the technique of using those tools. Once you learn those basics, then you can actually start using them in creating beautiful things like music. Like a musician, when they pick up a guitar, they're not really paying attention to, they're not really thinking about what their fingers are really doing so much. They're just playing music. And when I'm at the level now when I'm doing wood turning, I don't really think about where my tool position is and how the tool is cutting or anything. I just start cutting wood.
Wow.
If you can think of it as that kind of an analogy.
Yeah, no, I love that because it makes sense. It's like anything, even if a person doesn't find themselves particularly artistic, you know, if they've ever driven a stick. Remember you first learning how to drive a stick and it's just like this is never gonna work. There's so much to think about. And then all of a sudden you're just driving and it's just natural to what you're doing. So how old were you when you started doing this?
Well, I started doing this actually in my grandfather's workshop when I was just a kid. And it was such a cool thing. Like he would take me down into his workshop, and I love spending time with my grandfather. He was an amazing man, and he had a lot of different talents. He did gardening, but he also did some amazing woodwork. And when I think back, he probably got into it for the same reason that I did when I started getting older. It's so what I learned in his basement. He taught me basic tool control, and it was all under very controlled conditions. He gave me little tiny simple projects to make. The first thing I ever made was a candle holder.
Yeah.
And he showed me how to do it, and he was showing me the tools and little different techniques you could use for finishing it. And then I got better and better at it. But when I think back to the reason he probably got in it, it really is a stress relief type of a hobby. And I think a lot of hobbies are like that. It takes a lot of concentration. And when I was once in my career, I had quite a stressful career when I worked. And I would come home and I'd be a little bit stressed out, and I'd go down in my workshop. And once as I turn that lathe on, you stop thinking about work because you can't think about anything else when you're doing it. So you're concentrating on what you're doing in front of you, and it just makes all those other issues all go away. And it's just a very relaxing way of trying to get rid of that stress in your life. And that's really why I started doing it.
Right. So it's the stress reduction and it's creating and it's a beautiful marriage.
Yeah. So the job that I had, it was a lot of paperwork driven type work. So you would work for weeks on end on a big report or a big project, and you wouldn't really see any progress until the very end. Where it was wood turning, it's almost immediate gratification. You can see results start to happen right away. So I could go downstairs, I'd put a piece of wood on that lathe, and I could come up almost with not quite a finished product, but I'd actually see some results right away, which sort of gave me a little bit more satisfaction in life than working on a big paper project that you're seeing a big stack of paper, but really until that project's all finished, you don't see any end result to it. Whereas this one here, it took away all the stress of my job, and I was able to actually create something that was finished that I could actually physically hold in my hands.
Right. Do you still have the candlestick?
No, I don't. I think I gave it to my mother.
Yeah,
but I do have some of the stuff that I made quite early in my career. So when I got married, I had forgotten a lot of those skills that my grandfather taught me because he passed away quite a few years before that. And I was able to use his wood. I inherited his wood lathe from him. So I set it up in the house here in my garage, in my workshop, and I started working on it. Well, I was having mixed results because I didn't have somebody telling me what I was doing right and what I was doing wrong. So Mary gifted me some wood turning lessons that I took. And that was probably the best thing I ever did, because it really taught me the basics again, and taught me some other things that I didn't even know, that even my grandfather didn't teach me, because he was just teaching me the basic stuff. So I learned how to use some of the more advanced tools that I had. And it really sped up my learning process and sped up the enjoyment process because I wasn't doing things wrong anymore.
Right. Wow. Yeah, I can understand that. I know that even, playing an instrument or whatever, the minute somebody shows you this other way of doing it, the correct way of doing it, it becomes easier. And who doesn't want to, I always tell people if I teach ukulele or something, I'm going to teach you these 3 chords because you'll be able to play a song by the end of this lesson. You might not play it really great, but you'll be able to play a song. And, 3 chords will get you another 100 songs in a minute. So, because we like to, and it's not just quick results like, people are talking about, lately, with social media and us just flicking through something, whereas everything's so quick to our fingertips. But everybody, we like to we like to do something and do it well, and then from there we can start to get like really expert at it. So I love that. I love that. So then what was your first thing you made, if I may, after you started, when you came back to it? Now you're married, and you've taken your bride so kindly and wisely, as we know Mary is very good at these things. She got you this course. What was the first thing you made then?
The first thing I made, and I still have that, was a thin-walled bowl, and it's called live edge. So basically, you're turning a bowl the opposite direction that you would normally intuitively think. So typically, when you wouldn't get a round surface on that bowl, you're getting the bark of that bowl on the top, and it'll end up as an irregular shape. And what happens then is you're turning it from the outside of the tree going down into the inside of the tree.
Oh, I've seen things like that. I like things with a little rough around the edges.
And these ones they're rough around the edges because they've got all the bark showing on the rim of that bowl. And it's not a nice level bowl because as the tree is round, you're turning a bowl out of that. So one edge of that bowl is going to be, the two ends are going to be higher. The two ends are going to be higher, and then they drop down as you get to the round part of the bowl of the tree.
Oh, wow. So here's the thought. So right now someone's listening and they thought, oh, I always thought I'd like to try doing woodwork. Like I mean, I have no idea the cost of, well, any equipment is expensive. That's just, I'm looking at that behind you and I'm thinking that, yeah, that's not something that somebody just, but what if somebody that, maybe they're younger, they don't have a bunch of money or anything like that? What would be a suggestion? What should be some of their first things that they might want to purchase or save up for, buy secondhand, however this all works? Go in with a team of people. How might somebody start this?
Well, I run a large Facebook group outside of my own personal Facebook group. I'm the administrator of it, and I got about 25,000 members, over 25.
Oh, wow, okay.
So in that group, when people are asking that same question that you're asking, and it gets asked a lot,
Right.
I always recommend that the first thing they do before they buy anything at all is go take some lessons. So you can contact, there's wood turning groups and clubs all across the world. And the best thing they can do is join one of those clubs, and those clubs have instructors, they have mentors, and they offer lessons, and take some lessons first. At that point, you're going to get an understanding of the tools, because if you go and buy, it's like going to buy a car and then think, oh, now and driving around for a few weeks without any lessons, it's not going to end well. So get the lessons first and then buy the equipment. Now, when it comes to equipment, there's a lot of used stuff out there, because the lathe that you see in the background there, that's a professional quality lathe. I didn't start with that. I worked my way up.
Right.
And that's quite an expensive lathe. That's one of the world-class lathes that you can get, and it's actually made in Canada by One Way Manufacturing.
Oh, wow.
But you can get a lot of used equipment on your local buy and sell pages. And the best thing to do is to buy used, because when you buy used, you generally get some tools and accessories with it that you don't have. And those can be quite expensive.
Right.
So you can actually get into wood turning for a couple $100, maybe $300, and that'll get you set up with a starter lathe and a few tools. And then from there,
no, so that's just, that surprises me that someone could start so reasonably.
Yeah, it doesn't cost a lot of money, because you don't need any other equipment with it, because you just, the lathe does everything. You could actually put a square piece of wood on there that you bought at the lumber store, and you could saw it in half, like saw a square chunk off of it, and you could put that on there and take the corners off with the lathe and everything else. So you don't really need anything else. Once you get into a little bit further, then you might want like a chainsaw or something for getting the free trees, because there's free wood everywhere. I don't cut down any trees that are living trees. All the trees and all the wood that I use, it's recycled wood from trees that are dead or dying, that blew over in storms, whatever. And with just an inexpensive chainsaw, you can process that wood, and you have a lifetime supply of free wood.
Wow. So So that's interesting. So a person could, so somebody could get into this. The equipment's about $300, and even if they're at a, a position where that's going to take them a few months or whatever to gather that money, then fine, that's okay. And then the equipment is, and then the what do you call it? The
The
stuff that
wood,
the wood. But I was trying to think of what that would be called, like
well, just accessories that you would need to
yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. And I was thinking about it when you were saying that. I remember when I was a kid, like in high school was the first time I took woodwork and metalwork, and I thought, oh my gosh, I do remember it just feeling like this mesmerizing feeling of it. Just I can't remember what I made. I'm sure it wasn't too great though, but I remember it was a lot of girls weren't even in these courses at that time, but I had brothers, so it interested me.
right?
And then I remember another time making a shelf at the MFRC, the Military Family Resource Center. It had a woodworking course. And I took it, and it was nothing like what this is, not wood turning. It was just, we tried not to cut our fingers off with the saw and made some little thing that you could hang up stuff with or something. But I just remember that feeling of what it felt like to make that.
Yeah, it's
That
and wood turning. It's one of those things where you don't need a whole lot of body strength or anything else to do it. Kids can do it, women can do it, and even in that group that I administer, of over 25,000 people, there's about 15 to 20% of the people in there are actually females. So there is a
right.
lot of females doing wood turning, and it
Yeah,
can be quite an enjoyable hobby.
yeah, I would think so. And I think now people of younger generations, maybe they have not experienced, like when I was in school, for girls to be able to, I was in high school in the 70s, right? And it was there wasn't a lot of options that way. So it's not something that we automatically think of when we're thinking of what are we going to do. For us, it was sewing and crocheting and things like that, and I hated that stuff. It just wasn't in me to do it, but I
Right.
liked this. Like
Yeah.
anything
And
with wood is cool.
unfortunately, I'm sorry, Ellie.
No,
Unfortunately, they're taking a lot of those skills out of the high schools now. They're not doing a lot of shop classes and everything else. But the nice thing about this is you can actually, there's a lot of people outside of schools now that are teaching this hobby. And it's a huge growing hobby worldwide. There's a lot of people are getting into it now.
yeah, well, what I'm just thinking about, and then I was thinking about what you were saying about, you come home after a stressful day, and and this whole thing that I do here about finding your joy is about that. There's hidden gems all over. There's ways that we can reduce our stress. There's ways that we can do things that can, just help us to find our joy,
Yeah.
ways to be able to get outside of our heads, because that's what all of this is about, right? Anybody, I don't care who you are, we can get trapped in our heads. It can be anything. So now, during COVID, how many of these bowls were you popping out then?
I turn a lot. And that's an interesting segue, because the way I started turning semi-professionally now is because I had a really stressful job, like I said. So I'd
Yeah.
go down to my workshop and I'd make a bowl, and I'd finish it, and eventually it would work its way upstairs. I said, "Oh, Mary, here's another bowl for you." She goes, "Oh, not another one." Okay, if we got to the point, it was like she started calling the house of bowls, because they were everywhere. So eventually she said, "Okay, if you're going to put one up here, we have to take one and put it downstairs in the spare room there." So we had big boxes of these bowls down there. So every time I'd bring a new one up, she'd take one that she was okay putting away, and she'd put this new one up there. And it was just a constant rotation. Well, after a while, we had boxes and boxes of these bowls downstairs in the spare bedroom. So one day we had some friends came over, and they're looking at these and they're going, "Geez, every time I come over, I'm seeing different ones. Where do the other ones go?" And she just laughed. She goes, "Oh, they're downstairs. Come on, I'll show you." So we go downstairs, and there's these bowls, boxes and boxes of all these bowls and vases and stuff that I had created. And the one fellow there, his name was Gord, and he worked at the Royal BC Museum. And
Yeah.
he says, "Why don't you sell these things?" I said, oh, Gord, I says, it's all I can do to, I've got a busy job. I'm trying to do yard work. I just can't see myself going down on the street corner, setting up a table with an umbrella and trying to sell these things. That's just not me.
Yeah.
And he says, well, why don't you sell them through the museum? I can give you a contact there. So he introduced me to the woman that was doing the buying for the museum. And she says, oh, this stuff's beautiful. Like, we'll take it on commission. If it starts to sell, then we'll do that. We'll buy them all from you. So I brought a couple boxes of them down there, and she says, oh yeah, these things are selling good. Just bring us more, keep bringing us more. And that's just how I got into there.
Oh my gosh. So then now it becomes an income.
Yeah. Well, that's how I could afford that lathe in the background, because I tried it. Like Mary would buy some shoes, and I said, well, I got to buy a tool. Well, her shoes don't cost that much.
But she buys
but
lots of them.
Yeah. So it does. It's actually, as I got better at it, I would keep upgrading my lathe. So that's about the one that you see in the background there. That's the 4th lathe that I've ever owned. So I started off with my grandfather's, which was a little tiny 3-speed lathe made by Beaver Canada back in probably in the 1940s or 50s or something, with this old antiquated motor on it with an old V belt on it. And then I upgraded to a bigger one, very similar to that, but just a larger diameter, because you couldn't turn very big bowls with it. And then from there, I upgraded to a 16-inch diameter lathe. And that's when I started to really, that was all variable speed, electronic variable speed. And that made a huge difference on the things that I could create. And then once I retired, then I bought this lathe here. And now I can turn up to 24 inches in diameter. So those are like, they're massive, like they're huge centerpiece bowls, which are almost too big for most homes.
Right.
Because you think of something that's 2 feet in diameter, that's huge. It pretty much covers a whole tabletop.
Yeah, but you can see, and so now, so you're basically, when you're creating, you touch the wood, you start to get the feel for it. I understand that because I do different things that I do, and I understand how things, I start something, whether it's a painting or a song or a story or whatever I'm doing. Typically, I have no idea what I'm doing going in.
Yeah.
Or halfway through or by the end. Anyways, that's another story, but that's enough about me. But so now what about when do you have people commission pieces?
Yes. So that's the other part of it. So that's kind of what I would say is the non-creative part of what I do. So people will commission me and they'll say, well, I shouldn't say it's not creative, because sometimes they'll come to me and they'll say, Rick, I need a wedding gift. And I say, because what I do is I rough turn the bowls first, and then I season them, because when wood dries, it shrinks, and it doesn't shrink evenly. It shrinks into an oval shape generally.
Interesting. Okay.
So I take all this green wood that I've harvested, or that somebody else, usually tree service companies, have harvested. I take that and I rough turn it to typically 1 inch to 2 inches in diameter, the wall thickness. And then as it shrinks down, it dries. Some of them crack and they get tossed out, but most of them survive. And then at that point, they say, well, I'm looking for a bowl for my kids getting married or whatever. And they'll come over and say, well, come and look at the collection of this stuff that I've got that's already dried.
Right.
And I've piles and piles of it. So basically what they're doing, they just sort of dig through those, or I'll dig through them and I'll show them different shapes that they're looking for and different sizes. So then they'll say, well, I want one about this size, and I like that shape. And then I will pull out 2 or 3 pieces of wood that are similar in shape and size. And I'll say, you know what, I'll turn all 3 of them for you. I'll finish all 3, and then you can pick the one that you want.
Right.
So that's that would be one of the commission things that I do. But then other times they'll commission me to build things like burial urns. And those could be for pets or for people. So there's a big thing that people are they're getting their pets cremated, and they'll stick them you get it in a cardboard box, and you got to put it in something, and I make these beautiful urns out of wood, and then they can display that on their mantle or wherever they want.
Wherever they keep it. Oh, I love that. Oh,
Yeah.
That's a really rather, how do you say that? Rather sacred thing to be entrusted with for an urn. That's I like that. I would think that if I was going to keep somebody's ashes, that someone put that much care into it. Like, I'm just not grabbing something off a shelf and saying, you know, here, this is, that would mean a lot to me. So, and,
Yeah.
and colors, I mean, I guess the type of wood is gonna be like.
Yeah,
something-
wood comes in pretty much all different colors and shades, straight from pretty much almost white to black.
Right,
And there's white woods, there's yellow woods, there's red woods, like, and I'm talking red in color. There's
yes,
purple woods. So you can have mix and match. You can do it out of segments. So that's little small pieces of wood all joined together. And
oh,
that's the easiest way to make an urn. And that you can add different, you can add a lot of detail like in the middle of it. So you can
yeah,
have like a detailed ring.
wow. And then I guess different, like with a fence or anything else, you can stain it, a person, so someone could say, I would like whatever, fill in the blank made. And I would like it to be rough edge or smooth edge. And I would like it to be quite red or quite grainy or quite, like, they could, if they wanted to be that specific, and then you run with whatever those parameters are. Is that
Yeah,
how it works?
I can do that, but I typically like to let the beauty of the wood show through. So
Right,
the finish that I put on them is it's a clear lacquer finish.
okay,
So it actually, all it does is let you see the grain of the wood. It enhances the grain of the wood. So you don't see, it's not colored or stained. It's just a natural wood showing through.
right.
I've got a couple here. I can show you.
Oh, I would love
Show you.
that.
So let me reach over. So this is one here. This is made out of maple. And it's
Wow.
got kind of a weird shape to it. It's got an undercut rim,
Yeah,
kind of like almost like a donut type thing.
yeah, so smooth.
Yeah, they're very smooth. It's all museum grade quality finishes. So these ones all have all the wood that I do. It's got about 7 coats of sprayed on lacquer. Then they're all hand sanded and buffed and polished. So it's like almost like an automotive finish on them when they're done.
Wow.
And I can do everything from like a flat satin, flat finish to a high gloss finish.
Oh, just depending on whatever someone would want. That's,
Yeah. So this is kind of this just shows you some of the grain that you can get out of the wood. Oops, it's not showing up. There
yeah,
you go.
there now it is. Oh, look at that with this, I'm gonna call it streaks, but like over on your right, how that
Yes.
darker is coming through. It's just how the wood is, the natural grain of the wood. You're
Right. So
matching.
what that is, Ellie, that is when trees are dead and dying, they get bug infestations and they get staining that happens as a result of that. So that's another beauty of using wood that's dead and dying. It's great for the environment, but you also add all those extra characteristics that get added into the wood.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I'm looking at that thinking that it just looks awesome and it was actually from an infestation. So who would even.
Yeah.
So what's amazing to me about all this, right, is that I love that it started with you spending time with your grandpa. So I
Yeah.
mean that's what a beautiful legacy that he's passed on to you, right? Like I mean it's just, so it started just hanging out with grandpa and doing that, and then finding out ways to do that, then you know going on, there's youth and there's hanging out in college and all that stuff, and then you get married and you think you'll try this thing, and then Mary kindly gifts you that, so then it reopens that. But what's, so all of those are already really I don't know, it's interesting to me, it's lovely, I love things like that. But then I look at, you have this super stressful job, and I don't, maybe this is not correct, but you could tell me. I don't know if you would have ever described yourself as an artist.
No, I never would have. And actually, I struggled for a long time. People kept saying, "You're an artist." I go, "No, I'm not. I'm just a wood turner." But
Right.
then you start looking into like definitions of artist and what is art. It truly is. I truly am an artist. But I
Yes.
struggled with that definition or that title for a long, long time. I don't know. I'm not an artist, but yeah, you truly are. Like you can have artists that are musicians are artists, and pretty
Yes.
much every artisan and craftsperson out there is an artist in their own right. So yes,
Yes.
I do say that I am an artist now,
No,
but I
right.
generally refer to myself as a wood turner.
Yeah, but I can imagine that. So I love it that like we all have, we're all artists, right? Everybody, we have these things that are inside of us. And when I think about that, you were doing it mostly just as a stress reduction, and just is a very poor word to choose in that sentence, really, because
Yeah.
stress reduction is what's gonna, keep us all around long enough to say, hey, kid, get off of my yard, but or off, hey, kid, stay off my lawn. I mean, stress reduction is what's gonna keep us alive and keep us happy and healthy. Then it came from this thing that you did that was probably this lovely memory that you did with your grandpa, into a thing that you did just to de-stress after a lousy day, in a string of really stressful days. And then it started to work that way for you. And then now you're creating art, and it's beautiful. I
Yeah.
love that.
And it's when we talk about being creative, it doesn't always work. And I'm sure the same for you. You go down to you go and say, I'm going to write a song today. And it's like, oh man, I got nothing.
I got
And it's the
nothing.
same. It's the same for me when I'm doing wood turning. I'll go down there and I'll put a piece of wood on the lathe, and you know what? It just doesn't work, and I'm just not feeling it. So
Right.
I'll clean up the workshop, because there's always other stuff to do down there. I'll clean up the workshop or prepare some other bowls or do something down there, but I'm not really doing any like creative turning, because it's just not working for me then.
Yeah.
And other times you go down there and it's like, oh wow, it just feels right, and you just go and go and go, and all of a sudden you go, oh man, that looks so incredible. I love how that turned out. And you're not really planning on it to turn out that way. It just happens.
Yeah. What did Bob Ross used to call those happy little accidents, right?
Yeah.
Where we're doing one thing, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, of course, this is the thing.
Yeah.
And it feels to be part of that when I'm partnering. Like, I guess in my mind I'm envisioning sort of like, for you, when I'm partnering with whatever it is, whether it's an instrument or piece of paper and a pen, or you're partnering with wood, and it can feel like a struggle, and then until it doesn't.
Yeah.
And then there's
Yeah.
that moment where it's like, oh, angels singing in the background.
Well, and sometimes I'll start out with a bowl, trying to make a bowl, and the wood doesn't want to be a bowl. It wants to be a platter. And it just tells you that. It's just like, okay, now it's not a bowl anymore. It's going to be a platter or something else. And
Yeah.
the wood really speaks to you after a while. And it's just like when you're painting or something, the paint speaks to you. And yeah, all of a
Yes.
sudden that tree didn't want to be a tree. It wanted to be a rock.
Yes. It's true. And I think that sometimes when people are new doing things, like, I think that's really wonderful experience and wisdom to share with people who maybe are just starting out, or are about to start out. They're about to join your Facebook group of 25,000. They're about to see those things. Is that, I know that sounds all woo, but the reality is that when we put our hands to something, it starts to show us what it wants to be. I've gone to write songs a song that I wrote that is almost everyone's favorite song that I ever wrote. I started that song very dark. I was like in the worst. I thought it was going to be a tearjerker, and it ended up being the opposite. And everyone's always like, sing that song. And I think that just how creative processes work. I can imagine that you went to make a bowl one day, and then all of a sudden this most beautiful platter appeared, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh.
And that's fairly common advice in the group that I belong to. People say, well, sometimes it doesn't want to be what you want it to be, or you make a mistake, because that happens too. Like
Yeah.
you're working away, and all of a sudden a big chunk of wood splits off the bowl. Well, now you can't make a bowl. You got to make something else out of it, and you just
Right.
go with the flow. And it would be no difference if you're painting or something, and all of a sudden you slip with a brush, and it's like, oh, now that tree's going to be a little bit bigger than I want it to be, and you work with it. You just sort of incorporate it into your design. And it's the same thing with wood turning. It is a very creative process, and you just have to be prepared for those ebbs and flows that happen. And if you get some lemons, now you just make lemonade out of it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Or margarita, but just
Okay. I didn't know we wanted to go there.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, Rick, this has been great. Thank you. I mean, time just flew by.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Well, you made this so easy for me too, because I had a lot of anxiety coming into this. But you
yeah.
made it so easy to talk to you, and you made this process so interesting.
Oh, thanks. I think that the whole thing is when we just have conversations and invite people into them, then it works. And I feel like there's going to be people who are listening, I hope, that are going to explore this a little bit. And maybe we have with some of the next really amazing wood turners are sitting here today going, $300. I thought that was going to cost me like 10 grand to get into this. I could try this. I could
Well,
try this.
you can spend 10 grand if you want.
Yeah,
You
well,
can't
that's that's the whole thing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you look behind there's some instruments that cost only, under $500, and then there's some that cost thousands. So
Yeah.
so that's how it works, right? It's
Well, when you're learning to drive a car at the age
Yeah.
of 16, you typically don't go out and buy a Ferrari,
yes.
depending on who your parents are, I guess. But I didn't get the Ferrari.
I got a 59 Ford Zephyr, but that's another story. Wish I had that car now. Oh my gosh.
Oh, the memories that car could tell.
Yeah. And then the awkward pause. Yes, it could. Well, Rick, thank you so much for hanging out and telling us a bit about just a bit about what you're doing. It's amazing. And there's going to be for those listening, there will be in the notes, you'll be able to find Rick through his Homer's Woodcrafts Facebook page and through his larger Facebook page. Are we able to share that?
Yes. Yeah, I'll share that as well.
Yeah, and if you're in the Victoria area visiting or living, you can go on down to the Royal BC Museum and see some of his work there and purchase it. And we'll also have Rick's contact. Maybe you want to give him fire him off an email and buy from him directly, however you work all this. I'm not sure, but
I do give better deals directly, and I ship all over North America.
Okay, well, there you go. Now you know. So, Rick, thanks a lot. It was a lot of fun, and I think people learn a lot here today.
Thanks, Ellie.
Okay, take good care. So thanks to Rick, and thanks to all you for tuning in today. Have a great time, and do remember, find your joy. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you found a piece of your joy in this episode, I would love to hear about what came up for you so that we can continue to grow the impact of this show. Thanks again. See you soon. And remember, find your joy.